Hey everyone, it's Nate Warden, and I'm coming back with you around day two of 2 days with Jordan Valeriote in Toronto, Canada. So, for a quick recap without showing slides or playing audio from day one, one thing that was really important to me from day one was that my mix of the song called Downer identified things that, and there were many, that I could improve upon, and I'm not going to rehash that. Day two is a completely different animal because one of the folks who was attending this course had a completely different song, a completely different musical point of view, and because his tracking was really great overall, it made it much easier for Jordan to work through it. Although there were a couple of things that I wanted to call out here just out of curiosity and talk about the reason why a bunch of us attended this course. The first is that he used programmed drums. And, I'm not one of those people who'll be like, you must use analog drums to make it sound cool. The actual drum program was exceptional. The level of detail that went into it was exceptional. You can just tell with programmed drums, whether it be an Easy Drummer or Slate or Superior Drummer or whatever else, you can tell the snares and overheads, at least to my ears, at least, you can tell that they're programmed. So Jordan brought a bunch of life into those drums, and it turned out to be an excellent mix with the drums and bass. And then secondarily, the guitars were not sitting in the mix. And so the person who made the song said, yeah, let me get you the clean guitars, meaning unprocessed, meaning no plugins. I believe he was using one of the Neural DSP guitar plugins, and he was able to do what he needed to do, as did Jordan, once they started mixing the song. So basically, it was reamped and inside of Pro Tools with the amp or the model amp selection of choice, and the song turned out well. The reason why I have not shared the audio is because while I'd sent some email back and forth with the person who did this, the song is technically a cover, and I didn't want to infringe on anyone's rights, and I didn't want to, have anyone get into hot water. But the really interesting part about day two, and I want to dig into this very briefly, is that at the end of day two, Jordan said, "Look, we got a couple of hours. Why don't we play around with the SSL 4K and all this offboard gear, the 1176s, the L2As, the L3As, all those other things, and the desk. If we go back to that very briefly, the desk is interesting because you have your channels where you're going to route the audio, but then you're going to add these effect sends where you're going to have all this like kind of spaghetti layer of cables between how you've routed the various channels and how you're imparting the compression and reverb and whatever else into the channels and what become buses. So that was really fascinating to me. I'd done it before. I'd done it a bunch of times before, but like I said in the first part, it had been 21 years, and muscle memory is long gone. I understand functionally how it works. I cannot do it quickly. I'm like this old dude who kind of is like, yeah, I could have fiddled with it for like 3 hours, and probably people have been like, cool, bro, this works, but that's not the way day two was structured. There was a reasonable expectation of everyone that at the outset of these 2 days that we get a chance to do cool things like collectively. And so I was not really confident about asserting myself in mixing an analog. I did mix the bass on this track that I'll show you, and it turned out to be a cool final product. But really, out of the 5 people, 3 of the people in the group really, I watched them, I took notes. They did an exceptional job, and what came out of it was this. Now, I'm going to be careful about this because it's not my work. It's someone else's work. It's a Canadian band who's pretty well known, and you'll see we have a desk mix. Now, what's interesting between the desk mix, the downer mix from Jordan, and the original mix is, you look at the levels, and it's kind of, even at the loud parts, let's compare these. And again, this is not an accurate benchmark in terms of why we perceive loudness or whether or not this mix is balanced. Here you see there's a certain level that's reached here. It's quieter than Jordan's Mix It Downer, but it's more similar to the original mix. But the interesting part about mixing an analog, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying in part one, is that all the kind of visual cues you have in a DAW, a digital audio workstation, are not there in an easy, at least in my view, in an easy way that is a parallel to having this overarching way of viewing how the meters are running. You really have to look point to point to point to point to understand what the collective looks like. And so I'm going to play a couple parts of the song. It's literally like, let's see here. Start to finish is, I believe, like a minute and a half. So let's try to get to the end here, and we're going to say, move to seconds. And yeah, it's literally a minute and a half song. But to do this from end to end, it's not like Jordan was rushing people or anything. This took literally 2 hours, and it took a whole bunch of people to make this happen. And, in my view, it's a great final mix. And there are some things I want to talk about that I've even observed, which speaks to how you use plugins in a DAW versus doing this on a desk like the 4K, where you kind of run into some things that, somebody like CLA or a bunch of the other people who've done this successfully as mixers, or even Jordan himself, have already accounted for. So here, I'm going to play, let's go with, I don't know, a couple measures here. And just hear this acoustic and vocal performance. And it sounds, it's neat, right? Because you'll know the song. Again, I'm not going to talk about the band or the song because I don't want to, infringe on anyone's rights. I'm just playing this as an example of something that makes sense and how other people, given raw tracks, were able to recreate this in analog. So let me get into the very beginning.
Intent, you've earned it. Promise was made, not kept. Intent, you've earned it. Promise was made, not kept.
It's cool. And what's interesting about this is I love the acoustic tone, and it's basically acoustic and vocal. So here there's this brief intro part that's kind of like this.
Start with the best.
And you see, it's interesting here. It all starts on right channel, then it goes into the stereo mix. But then you see suddenly the song gets loud, and I say that in air quotes. So I'm going to play like the transition and a couple of measures afterwards. But I'll point out a couple of things I observed after I played through this.
With me.
Okay, let's take a look at this and go a couple measures deep. I'm just going to do this probably 4-measure loop through this chorus. Take a look at this meter right here, because when I listened to it originally, and to be clear, we're using 2As, 3As, 1176s, a couple other processors that are kind of escaping me, and also the old reverbs, meaning the controller-based reverbs where you will bust them in through the effect sends on various channels. I think there were 3 different reverbs there. But the people who did this were so passionate about it, and watching them and taking notes around it was another thing that was really worth, and I say this kind of as an analogy, was worth the price of admission, was something that I took some notes around and, just came home and said, yeah, this was good work. It's just a couple things, and I mention this not because I'm critiquing them, because I have the same problems where sometimes you're deep in the process and you leave things out. So what we're going to see is that The left channel is actually highly underrepresented throughout this. And that was really interesting to me because I didn't hear it that way on the NS10s, the studio monitors, but I'm definitely hearing it and seeing it now. So let's go through that. So going through that, if you were paying attention to this meter on the right, there's like a 2-3 dB dBFS jog between left and right. And even if we bring this through for another 4 measures in a different part, you're going to see something similar. Yes, it's the same thing, and this is a really interesting thing that happens because, like, you look at this around the peaks, and the peaks are what's driving this. If you look at like this body of this, it's effectively the same volume. If you look at where the peaks hit, these peaks are obviously a lot higher than these, and that's leading to the difference in decibels. And so that is one of the challenges with analog and working on a desk like SSL or whatever else is you don't have necessarily a single source to view, okay, here's my left and right, or it's also entirely possible that the SSL 4K, its meters told us one thing, but given analog and given the analogy I made in part one about my friend who had a car with a gas gauge that no longer worked, and he kept notes to make sure he didn't run out of gas while driving. This could be the same thing. I'm not faulting the people. There's just this weird variance I think that happened due to the analog. So anyway, I don't want to over rotate on this, but again, this session, these 2 sessions with Jordan were totally worth it. And if you like his style and if this is something you want to do, I strongly recommend you take a session or sessions like this in the future. Thanks for your time.